Hello students, I hope by now you are fairly clear about the kind of concepts which you are going to study in this book of Indian Constitution at Work for your +1 CBSE. Today we shall start with a new topic which is one of the most important part of the Indian Constitution, that is the rights. In this chapter we will be referring to the fundamental rights which is mentioned in the Indian Constitution under part 3. So students, after going through this entire video, it is expected that you should be able to understand the meaning and importance of rights, the fundamental rights which are guaranteed under the Indian Constitution. You should also be able to understand the brief introductory portion of what NHRC is and how it works. Few concepts related to fundamental duties and the directive principles of state policy will also be covered in this video, and we'll end this chapter with the understanding of the right to property, which initially was a part of fundamental rights but now is just a legal right. So let's begin our understanding of the meaning of rights with understanding first two examples which are mentioned in your NCERT books. The first story is of the year 1982, and it relates to the construction workers who were engaged for various works during the construction of flyovers and stadiums during the Asian Games. Now, when the Asian Games were being organized in India in the year 1982, a lot of contractors were engaged by the government, and a lot of construction workers who were very poor were employed for the various manual work. A team of social scientists studied and reported and petitioned to the Supreme Court that the condition of these construction workers was pathetic, and they were not even provided with the minimum wage rates which are actually given in the Constitution, that the minimum wage rates are to be prescribed to. So this was a direct exploitation of one of the fundamental rights. Therefore, the Supreme Court accepted this plea of the social scientists. It directed the government to ensure that all the workers, there were around thousands of them, all the workers should be getting the prescribed wages for their work. We'll take you to another example, and this example is about a person, Machal Lalang, who was 23 years old, and he was arrested. He was arrested on the charges of causing grievance injuries, and he was found to be mentally unstable also. Now you must be knowing that if somebody is mentally unfit, the police doesn't initiate the proceedings. That means the judicial proceedings are held up till the time the person is of sound mind. So this person was then admitted into a hospital where he was treated and treated successfully. That means he was fit. So the doctors of the hospital, they wrote to the jail authorities once in 1967 and then again in 1996 that this gentleman is now fit and he can stand a trial. Unfortunately, no action was taken on these reports given by the doctors. He remained in the judicial custody. Ultimately, there was a team appointed by the NHRC. We will be discussing NHRC later. They intervened, they inspected the under trials of various jails, and then they petitioned that this person has already bypassed the term of sentence of punishment which could have been given had he been found guilty of causing injury to somebody. You will be shocked to know that this person spent 54 years under custody, and that too for a case which was never heard by the judge. And if ever it was heard, the punishment which could have been given to this person for causing injury to somebody would not have been 54 years. Therefore, the understanding of these two examples now will give us an idea as to what the rights are and then how important these rights are. So essentially, rights are the conditions of social life. These are given by the society and recognized by the state. The purpose is to promote the welfare of people. So rights are those conditions which the state provides to its citizens by mentioning it into the constitution, and these conditions usually are desired and demanded by the society for the well-being of the people at large. Here, let me introduce you to a technical term which is very frequently asked in the exams, the Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights refers to the list of rights which are mentioned and protected by the Constitution. We usually discuss the Bill of Rights in the context of the American Bill of Rights. However, this word can be utilized anywhere. It clearly means the rights which are mentioned in a list and given and guaranteed and protected by the Constitution of any given country. Now we'll talk about the fundamentals as guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. Students, you will be surprised to know that the fundamental rights, just like the Constitution, was not a work of few days. In fact, in 1928, Motilal Nehru Committee had demanded for a Bill of Rights. In 1928, there was a group of people who came together and listed down the various rights which they wanted to be given to the Indian citizens. So when the Constitution was being framed by the Constituent Committee for the Independent India, this list of rights actually was incorporated as a part of the fundamental rights. And the fundamental rights are different than the legal rights. These are listed separately and these are protected and guaranteed by the Constitution. Any changes in the fundamental rights is only possible by amending the Constitution itself. So no right can be changed unless the Constitution is changed, and none of the government's organs, that means legislature, executive, judiciary, none of them can violate the fundamental rights of the Indian citizens. On the other hand, there are legal rights also. Legal rights, please understand, are very simple rights which are protected by ordinary law, and therefore these can be changed by ordinary legislature. So I hope this difference between the legal and the fundamental rights are clear to you. The legal rights are ordinary law, therefore these can be changed by ordinary process of the parliament. Fundamental rights are basic in nature and it can only be changed if the Constitution is changed. If you look at page number 31 of your NCERT books, you will find a tabular formation of presentation of all the fundamental rights as guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. We will be doing all of these rights, that means we'll be discussing all these rights one by one. So to begin with, you must remember that the fundamental rights are given in part 3 of the Indian Constitution. The articles are from 12 to 32. You will have to remember the parts and articles for a 1-mark question. The first fundamental right is the right to equality. Now, this right to equality is further divided into certain provisions. We'll be looking at these one by one. The first is equality before law. This is Article 14 of the Indian Constitution. This means that every individual will get equal protection in the court of law. The law will be equally applied to all. The second is prohibition of discrimination, and this is Article 15. Discrimination is biasness, not treating people equally. So prohibition is to stop, to avoid. So prohibition of discrimination on any grounds like religion, race, caste, gender, place of birth, etc. is not allowed. Similarly, no person can be restricted from entering into a shop, hotel, well, tank, bathing ghat, road, just on the basis of their religion, region, caste, etc. So that means the people will be treated equally. The next is the equality of opportunity, which is Article 16 of the Indian Constitution. This means that in case of government jobs, everybody will get an equal opportunity. Of course, the person has to clear the whatever is the entrance or the screening process. They will also have to be eligible to that particular post, but then everybody will get a fair equal chance of the government opportunity jobs. Then is abolition of untouchability, which is Article 17. Untouchability was a practice of treating some section of the society as lower sections. So not touching them, not letting them use the public places, etc. So as per the fundamental right, this is not allowed now. And lastly, Article 18 says abolition of titles. So earlier there used to be certain titles given as rewards by the British, and these were completely abolished except two. One is the military titles. So if somebody is in the military and is of certain rank, he will be called with that rank. And other is the educational titles. For example, if somebody has done MBBS or somebody has done a PhD, they will get a title of doctor in front of their name. So barring this, rest other titles are abolished. The next fundamental right is the right to freedom. Right to freedom is divided into two sections. The first is Article 19, and it talks about the individual's freedom of speech and expression. The people have their right to assemble peacefully. But please remember one thing, that these freedoms do not come as absolute. That means there are restrictions. So if I go back, people have right to freedom of speech and expression, but they cannot use derogatory remarks or they cannot abuse anyone. Similarly, they can assemble, but then they need to assemble peacefully, and they can only assemble if it is allowed to be assemble at one particular point of time at a place. If, let's say, the government has or the administration has restricted the assembly, so one can't say that I have a right to assemble peacefully, so I am assembling. So Article 144 is to be discussed here. As per Article 144, not more than 4 people can assemble. So if at any point of time Article 144 is invoked, then we lose this freedom. The next is the freedom to form associations. But again, these unions and associations have to be legal. One can't organize into some association and then carry on some illegal work. Obviously, that is not allowed. The next is to move freely. Again, people have a fundamental right to move freely throughout the territory of India, but if there are any restricted areas, so let us say there is a restricted cantonment area or military area, so obviously a border area, so obviously the person cannot go there. Then we have a right to reside and settle in any part of India, but again there are areas earmarked that these are residential areas, these are industrial areas. So person can only reside in an area which is earmarked for being a residential area. And then we have a freedom to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or business. But once again, this profession has to be legal profession. So one can't, take up a illegal thing and say that I have a right. So obviously that is not allowed. Then is Article 20 under the right to freedom, which says protection in respect of conviction for the offences. This means that if somebody is arrested, the person has the right to defend himself by a lawyer of his choice. And also it is mandatory for the police to take that person to the nearest magistrate within 24 hours. And therefore, this also leads us to the next fundamental right, that is the right to life. As per the right to life, which is a part of Article 21, no citizen can be denied his or her life except by the procedure as laid down under the law. So if somebody has done a heinous crime and the judiciary decides to give him capital punishment, obviously in that case the right to life will be revoked. Then Article 21A, this is the right to education. This article actually has been added by an amendment in the year 2009, and hence it has become right of all the children between the age of 6 to 14 years to seek free education in the government schools. So it is the right of every Indian between the age of 6 to 14 years to go up to the government schools, and they'll be given free education there. The last right under the right to freedom is Article 22, protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. So sometimes, there is a concept of preventive detention. Ordinarily, what will happen is if somebody has committed a crime, he is arrested. But sometimes the police may just arrest somebody prior to the commitment of crime with an excuse that it was very obvious that this person was involved in something leading to a crime. But then there are provisions in the Constitution wherein a person can seek an anticipatory bail from the court, and he may avoid arrest and detention as per the conditions laid down by the court. The court, however, will give fair chance to the police to represent their case, that whether or not the bail can be given in such cases to the person who has applied for bail. So this is the list of right to freedom. I would like to repeat myself that these are not absolute freedoms given to Indian citizens. Every freedom has got some check. So everybody enjoys his freedom in his or her own sphere, but he does not have right to interfere in the freedom of somebody else. The third fundamental right is the right against exploitation. So there are two provisions. Under Article 23, we study that human trafficking is not allowed. Human trafficking is buying of humans, and also the forced labor. So forced labor means that somebody is being forced to do a job and he is not even paid according to the work that he is doing. So that is not allowed, and the human beings cannot be sold and purchased. That is prohibited as per the Indian Constitution. And then Article 24 says that child labor is prohibited. That means children below the age of 14 years, they cannot be employed, and especially in the hazardous job, they cannot be employed. The next fundamental right is the right to freedom of religion. Now this has been very explicitly mentioned in the Indian Constitution. It starts with Article 25 saying that an Indian individual has the freedom of conscience and free profession, practice and propagation of religion. That means an individual can propagate or practice any religion of his choice. Article 26 says that Indians have a freedom to manage their own religious affairs. So that like if I want to follow a particular religion, arrange something related to my religion, I am allowed to do that. Article 27 says we have a freedom to pay taxes for promotion of any particular religion. So let us say I want to do any charity. I want to donate some money either to a temple or to a church or a gurdwara or a mosque. I am free to do that. So I have freedom to pay tax to promote my own religion. Then is Article 28, which says that Indians have a freedom to attend religious instructions or worships in certain educational institutions. So there are certain educational institutions which are meant for minorities. In such institutions, if a particular religious prayer or instruction is given, it is allowed. The next is the cultural and educational rights. This particularly belongs to the minorities. That means certain scheduled castes and scheduled tribes who were considered to be less in number and considered to be backward also. So this particular rights especially are meant for the minorities of our country. So as per Article 29, the minorities have a right to protect their language, their culture, and they can undertake activities to promote their language and culture. Article 30 says that the minorities have a right to establish educational institutions. So many a times you will find in a town that there are certain educational institutions which are run by the minorities, and in these educational institutions, promotion of that particular religion, worship, instruction of that religion is therefore allowed. The last right mentioned in the fundamental right is the right to constitutional remedies. This is Article 32 of the Indian Constitution. I would like you to give a detailed understanding to this right to constitutional remedies. Now, it talks about various writs. So there are various writs mentioned under this article. Let me explain the meaning of a writ. A writ basically is a special order. So it is a special order. A writ is a special order. Under this article of constitutional remedies, the right to constitutional remedies, Article 32, there are 5 writs mentioned. Let us look at these one by one. The first is the writ of habeas corpus. It means that the court orders that if somebody has been arrested, he should be presented before the court within 24 hours. So habeas corpus writ means that if somebody has been arrested, he has to be presented in front of the magistrate within 24 hours. The second writ is of mandamus. Mandamus in English means to command. So this writ is issued when the court finds that a particular office holder is not doing his legal duty. So there is some office bearer, somebody in the government who is not working properly. So the court can give an order, can give a command for him to do his work. The next is prohibition. I hope this word prohibition in English is clear to you. So this writ is issued by a higher court to a lower court, and this is issued if the higher court feels that the lower court has exceeded or bypassed its jurisdiction. You know, you'll be talking about, there's another chapter of judiciary in your book. So you will learn that every court has an area of cases which can be heard by it. So if the senior court feels that the junior court has exceeded its jurisdiction, so the writ of prohibition can be issued, and the junior court can be asked not to listen to that particular case. Then is the fourth writ, quo warranto. So if in case a court finds that a person is holding office but he is not entitled to that office, so in that case a writ of quo warranto can be issued, that by what right is somebody holding a particular office. The last writ is of certiorari. This means the court orders a lower court to transfer a matter pending before it to the higher authority. So let us say a higher court feels that there is some case of very sensitive nature being heard by a lower court. So in that case, a higher court will command or give orders to the lower court to transfer that court to the higher authority. So these are the 6 fundamental rights as guaranteed in the Indian Constitution. I hope these are clear to you. Now these writs are exercised only in the court of law. That means judiciary has the power to protect the rights of the citizens. Apart from the judiciary, the Constitution has also laid down certain other mechanisms who are responsible for the protection of the rights of individuals. And one such mechanism is the National Human Rights Commission, and in short we call this as NHRC. NHRC basically is a government established institution which was started in 1993. It composes of a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India, a former Judge of the Supreme Court, a former Chief Justice of a High Court, and 2 other members who have knowledge and experience in matters relating to human rights. So basically this commission functions by inquiring into various incidents of violation of the rights. They visit the jails to study the conditions of the inmates, and they also undertake various researches in the field of human rights. Many a times the commission also receives the complaints directly. In fact, many of them are received, thousands in numbers, and these relates to a lot of problems like the custodial deaths, custodial rapes, etc. But please remember that the commission does not have the power to prosecute. That means it cannot prosecute or give punishment to anyone. The role of the NHRC is only to study, make an understanding of a situation, and give recommendations to the government or to the court to initiate any proceedings of the inquiry that it has done. But you must also understand that in India and in most of the democratic countries abroad, NHRC plays a very important role in the protection of the rights of individuals. Now we come to part 4 of the Indian Constitution, which states the directive principles of state policy from Article 36 to 51. Directive principles are the guidelines given to the state by the Constitution. And the point which is very important here to understand is that these guidelines are non-justiciable. That means these are not legally enforceable. That means that if any government does not implement a particular guideline, the citizens cannot go to the court asking the court to instruct the government to implement that particular policy. So this is non-justiciable. That means it cannot be enforced by the judiciary. So then who is responsible for ensuring that these guidelines are followed? Well, it is just a moral force. That means it depends upon the governments themselves as to how many and to what extent would they like to follow these guidelines as given in the Constitution. These guidelines are divided into three things. The first is the goals and objectives that we as a society should adopt. So it talks about things like the government should work for the welfare of the people, that is Article 38. Then the government should work to raise the standard of living, that is Article 39. The government should also promote the international peace, that's Article 51. That's the first part of the directive principle. The second part of the principles are that these rights are actually, there are certain rights also given in this directive principles. That means these are those rights which the government should give to their citizens over and above what they already have in the fundamental rights. So for example, right to adequate livelihood, equal pay for equal work, right against exploitation, right to work. So these are certain rights which are a part of directive principles. That means the Constitution instructs the state to provide these rights to the citizens. But remember, these are non-justiciable. That means if any government is not able to provide right to work, so the citizens cannot move the court for this. And the third part of directive principles contains certain policies that the government should adopt. Like the government should have uniform civil code, Article 44 it is. Then the government should adopt a policy of prohibiting the consumption of alcoholic liquor. The government should promote cottage industries. The government should prevent the slaughter of cattle, and then the government should promote village panchayats, etc. So these are certain policies which are a part of directive principles, and the state is free to enforce these policies, rights and goals at the time when they deem it's fit for them to do so. Otherwise, these cannot be challenged in the court of law. Then we have Part 4A of the Indian Constitution, Article 51A, which is the fundamental duties of citizens. Please remember, this part was not mentioned in the original Constitution. It was only in 1976 by the 42nd Amendment to the Constitution that this was incorporated in the Constitution of India. At that time, total 10 duties were listed. Over a period of time, this has added up and now we have 11 duties. So this part again is related to the citizens of the country, that citizens should have certain duties towards their country over and above the rights that they enjoy. Many a times a topic also is discussed about the relationship between fundamental rights and the directive principles of state policy. So I think I must very briefly reflect upon this topic. Remember, the fundamental rights are the rights or powers given to the individuals, whereas directive principles are the guidelines given to the state. Next is that fundamental rights are justiciable. One can move the court if these are violated, whereas for DPSP these are non-justiciable. Nobody can move the court for the implementation of these guidelines. Then fundamental rights usually are for the welfare of an individual. Rights are given in individual capacity, whereas guidelines given to the state under the DPSP are more of a social welfare. That means welfare of a general group of people. So these are the broad differences. You also can think of differences like fundamental rights are part 3, and then there are 6 fundamental rights, whereas directive principles of state policy are part 4, and then these are divided into 3 parts. So that's how an answer can be developed. Again, there can be a question as to the difference between fundamental rights and fundamental duties. So similarly, apart from saying the Article 3, part 3 is fundamental rights and part 4A is fundamental duties, you also can think of that fundamental rights have been in the Constitution right from the beginning. Fundamental duties were added only in 1976. There are 6 rights, there are 11 duties. Rights cannot be withdrawn, but again, the fundamental duties for a very large extent are non-justiciable. That means not very strict action can be taken if anybody violates these fundamental duties. Now let me come to a very important provision which was a part of fundamental right in the original Constitution, but in 1978 by the 44th Constitutional Amendment, this was removed from the fundamental rights and it became a legal right under Article 300A, that is right to property. Now this became a very controversial topic, and eventually there was a conflict between the legislature and judiciary. The legislature wanted to make amendments in the fundamental rights, and the judiciary was not allowing this to happen. You will be studying about this in much detail under the Keshavanand Bharti case, which is a part of your later chapters. Again, you will be studying this, but for very brief understanding, please give thought to the idea that there was a conflict between the Parliament and the judiciary on the topic of right to property. The Parliament wanted to amend certain parts of the Constitution, but the court said that Parliament cannot make an amendment that would violate the fundamental rights. And ultimately this controversy was settled by the Keshavanand Bharti case. It was a case against the Union of India. And in this case, the court said that there are certain basic features of the Constitution which cannot be changed by the Parliament. In the end, the right to property was taken away from the fundamental rights and brought in a part of only the legal rights. So for this chapter, only this much of understanding will be sufficient for you. We will dwell more about the Keshavanand Bharti case in the subsequent topics. So I hope with this slide, we are clear about 3 broad topics of our chapter 2. Number 1, the fundamental rights. Number 2, the directive principles of the state policy. And number 3, the fundamental duties. Happy learning. Thank you.